Welcome to Doncast Deep Dive.
It's great to be back for another one.
It really is. And before we get into the specifics of today, I just want to, for anyone joining us, set the stage a bit. This deep dive explores the stories, the themes, and the creative journeys behind compilations from a dawn.
Right, which is that really celebrated series of musical narratives and reflections authored by Don Phondeaux.
Exactly. And each deep dive we do uncovers the inspiration, the evolution, and really the personal growth woven into these unique compilations.
Which brings us to today.
Yes, today is episode 9, focusing on the compilation titled Lovely Lust.
And I mean, it is just a deeply layered conceptual project we're stepping into today.
It really is. And just as a reminder, Don Phondeaux is this incredible creative force blending music, storytelling, and cultural expression. And his work is really marked by deep introspection, community, and the art of curation.
Yeah, curation is really the key word there.
Definitely. So the goal for today, our mission for this deep dive, is to unpack Don's notes on the Lovely Lust playlist. We really want to examine how music can translate emotions when we feel numb, look at the blurred lines between memory and fantasy, and see how a curated soundscape can act as a bridge to new experiences.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever relied on a playlist to do your feeling for you, like an emotional life raft, when your own heart is running on empty?
That framing, I mean, it just completely changes how we usually analyze music. You know?
Right. How so?
Well, we're conditioned to think of music as like a magnifying glass. If you're thrilled, you play a high BPM track to turn that thrill into a massive celebration.
No, for sure. Or if you're heartbroken, you play a slow ballad to, lean into the grief.
Exactly. You use music to amplify a signal that's already there.
Yeah.
But the baseline Don is operating from here isn't a signal at all. It's static. It's absolute zero.
Right, because that was the exact emotional headspace Don was in when Lovely Lust was conceived.
Yeah.
In his notes, he states he was in a period where he, quote-unquote, couldn't feel.
Wow. Just entirely flatline.
Yeah. The natural warmth of human emotion had just faded for him, and he explicitly says music had become his only translator.
That's a powerful way to put it.
It is. He says when he looked back at his past loves, he wasn't feeling the sting of loss or the warmth of nostalgia. They were just playing in his mind, like old recordings.
Mm.
He describes his state as being coldly objective.
You know, that term coldly objective, it does a lot of heavy lifting there because it means he wasn't suffering from amnesia.
Right. He remembered everything.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The data of his past relationships was fully accessible to his conscious mind. He just had this profound psychological distance from it. The neurological pathways that normally trigger a physical response to a memory like, a quickened pulse or tightening your chest.
They were completely bypassed.
Yes.
Yes.
To completely shut down.
But let me stop you there, because here's where the narrative gets really interesting. In the absolute dead center of this emotional flatline, a friend reaches out to Don.
Okay.
And this friend asks Don for a playlist he could, quote, play for the ladies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He specifically asks for something smooth, sultry, and soulful. Basically a soundtrack for low lights and long nights.
Which is, that's a massive contradiction.
Right.
You have a man experiencing this deep emotional winter being asked to essentially bottle up the heat of the summer for someone else.
Exactly. And here's my pushback, like right out of the gate. How does someone who is feeling completely disconnected and objectively numb curate a soundtrack specifically designed for intimacy and romance?
It's a great question.
I mean, wouldn't your curation just sound clinical? Is he just relying on muscle memory here, or is he building a fire he can't actually feel?
I completely understand why that feels counterintuitive, but if you look at the psychology of curation, sometimes the best curators are the ones observing firmly from the outside.
Wait, really?
Yeah, think about it. When you are deep in the throes of lust, your perspective is incredibly skewed. You're compromised by your own neurochemistry, the dopamine, the oxytocin.
Like adrenaline, all of that.
Right. Everything sounds profound when you're in love. But when you're numb, you possess this rare, unclouded clarity.
So you're saying the distance is actually an advantage?
Precisely. It's sort of like a master chef who has temporarily lost their sense of taste from a severe cold.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. They can't enjoy the meal they're cooking, but they still understand the exact chemical science of how salt balances acid and how fat carries flavor.
Right, they know the mechanics of it.
Exactly. Don was able to perfectly score the space between lust and love precisely because he wasn't currently lost in it. He became a pure, unbiased conduit for his friend's request.
That chef analogy completely unlocks it for me. He's relying on his mastery of the ingredients. And the specific vibe he builds with Lovely Lust is so nuanced. He describes the compilation as a blend of the lovely in lust with the lustful in love.
Which is a really important distinction to make. He isn't curating raw, aggressive physical desire.
No.
But he's also not curating a pristine platonic fairy tale. He is targeting that exact middle ground.
Right. It's entirely about the tension in a lingering touch. It's stolen glances and unspoken intentions. He actually notes that it's for the moments where silence speaks volumes.
And we have to ask why silence speaks volumes in that specific stage of intimacy.
Well, psychologically, what's happening there?
When two people are hovering in that blurred line between love and lust, verbalizing the feeling can actually destroy the tension. Words define boundaries, and lust thrives in the undefined spaces.
That makes so much sense.
Right, so Dawn is curating a soundscape that speaks on behalf of the bodies in the room, so people don't have to.
And to ground that internal state, Don uses this really evocative external metaphor. He talks about the physical changing of the seasons, like autumn creeping in, the daylight shortening, and the physical environment getting colder.
Yeah, culturally we might call that cuffing season, but Dawn's framing gets right into the biological mechanics of it.
How so?
Well, human beings are fundamentally driven by thermoregulation. When it gets cold, our bodies instinctively seek warmth. And Don points out that we look for that warmth in old flames, new sparks, and temporary homes.
Yeah, he says some warm up under covers, others warm up under others.
Under others, that phrasing is just, it's brilliant.
It is so striking. And it connects that physical chill of autumn to Don's own internal emotional chill. The compilation itself becomes a substitute for warmth, because he admits the playlist is filled with memories he could no longer feel, and fantasies he didn't dare indulge in.
That is the ultimate paradox of Lovely Lust. He's engineering a climate of intense intimacy, but fully acknowledging that he's locked out of it himself.
So let me ask you, listening to this, have you ever used music to simulate a season of life you aren't currently in? Like letting the music wrap around you like skin-on-skin comfort, just like Don describes?
It's a profound use of audio therapy, honestly, because music bypasses the logical centers of the brain. It taps directly into our sensory memory. Even if you're emotionally numb, a slow bass line can force your body to simulate relaxation and intimacy.
Well, let's actually dig into how he engineers that tension musically. We have his track-by-track breakdown, and he doesn't just throw sultry songs together randomly.
No, it's a very deliberate narrative.
Exactly. So let's look at Don's specific notes on the key tracks. He starts by highlighting the song Tomorrow by M.anifest, featuring Burna Boy.
Right, which sets the existential stakes immediately.
Yes. Don says this song represents the pain that sparks the passion. Because tomorrow isn't promised, so you have to love like it doesn't exist.
It's a brilliant psychological hook. When you introduce mortality, the idea that time is fleeting, you bypass long-term anxieties and force a person into the present moment.
Right, it creates an urgency. But then he doesn't leave you in that frantic state. He immediately highlights Naked Wire by Simi.
Oh, the shift there is incredible.
Yeah, Don describes Naked Wire as a slow, sweet serenade showing deep appreciation for electrifying love exactly as it is in the present moment.
Notice how we go from the urgency of tomorrow to a hyper-present, slow serenade. It demands that the listener stop anticipating the future and physically sink down into the current feeling.
Which flows perfectly into his notes on High Me by Mola. He calls the smooth production on this track a calm thrill.
A calm thrill. That is such a contradictory phrase.
It is, but Don notes it demands complete presence and commitment to holding a partner down.
You know, early stage infatuation is usually a chaotic thrill. It's anxiety and butterflies. But a calm thrill is a grounded high. It's confidence.
Right. And from there, Don moves into what feels like direct tactical advice. He highlights Call Me Every Day by Chris Brown featuring WizKid.
This part of his notes is fascinating.
It really is. Don points out the simple, non-corny imagery in the lyrics. And he literally gives direct advice to his friend and the listener writing, take notes and approach her with this.
I love that. And why does simple imagery work better than, like, elaborate poetry here? It's cognitive load.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If you're building physical intimacy, cognitive overload kills the mood. You don't want a lyrical puzzle. Don is handing his friend a blueprint for direct communication.
And he takes that direct communication even further with the next track, No Secrets by E. Kelly. Don notes that this song demands honesty and calls out shady behavior to bring everything to light.
I'm so glad he included this because it grounds the fantasy.
How do you mean?
Well, usually we think of fantasies as escapes from reality, right?
Hmm.
Deception is often baked into a fantasy like a secret rendezvous.
Oh, I see. Like sneaking around.
Right. But by highlighting no secrets, Don is arguing that true intimacy, the kind that sustains the blurred line between love and lust, actually requires radical transparency. Honesty is the grounding wire that prevents the fantasy from short-circuiting.
That is profound. You have to strip away the secrets first.
Yeah.
Once that foundation is laid, he moves into the purely physical. He brings up skin by minds.
The visceral peak of the playlist.
Exactly. Don says this track is pure physical chemistry. He actually calls it music to a siren's ears.
The siren metaphor is perfect. In mythology, a siren song is an undeniable pull. At this stage, the logical brain shuts down. It's just gravity and touch.
Which sets up the final track, Perfectly Sinner, by Attica and the School. Don describes this as an honest admission of a muse's effect. He says it's a dangerous love where you are mindful of the trip but entirely mindless in your behavior.
If we step back and connect the dots across this whole track list, Don is giving us the entire spectrum of romance here.
Yeah, he really is.
We go from the grounding demand for honesty and no secrets to the totally mindless, dangerous surrender in Sinner. It perfectly mirrors the blurred lines of the playlist title.
It's a masterclass in pacing. But, the story of Lovely Lust doesn't actually end with the track list.
No, it evolves.
Right. Don shares this piece of personal lore. He reveals that this compilation actually shares a title and theme with an older, completely different playlist that he lost on an old iPad years prior.
I always love when lost devices become part of an artist's lore.
Right. It's so relatable, but it means the idea of lovely lust brewed slowly to maturity. It wasn't rushed.
And that shift in perspective is key.
Yeah, because Don notes that when he originally finalized it for his friend, he couldn't even enjoy the music fully.
Because of that numb state we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But now he writes that in a period of deep, self-confined solitude, he's finally given himself the freedom to process it and give it praise.
And I want to highlight the core revelation here from his notes. Because usually, nostalgic playlists take you back to a specific moment.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Like a time machine.
Right. But Don explicitly says this compilation doesn't take him back.
Yes. He says it's waiting for him to create new memories. So what does this all mean? It means Don didn't build a time capsule. He built a waiting room.
A waiting room. Wow.
Yeah. The sands of time are falling, and he's telling us to be present for it.
It's incredibly generous.
It really is. Which leads us to a prompt Don himself asks, and I want to put it directly to you listening right now. What song takes you back to a memory that feels like a fantasy?
And as you think about that, it raises an important question. Could the ultimate purpose of curating music for someone else actually be the way it secretly heals the curator over time?
That is something to think about. Thank you for joining this Doncast deep dive into compilations from a Don.
And remember, while we've reached the end of this deep dive, the journey doesn't stop here.
Exactly. So please like the video so the sound can travel further, and subscribe for more Doncast deep dives and stories from the Don's domain.
We'd love to see you there.
When you're ready to go deeper, visit the Don's domain at donphondeaux.com for more playlists, reflections, and written journeys.
Go check it out.
And if you're stepping outside, don't forget to let your style smile for you with a Stillo Phondeaux. Enjoy loudly, stay sound.